I love seeing everything in your background. My background is as plain as can be. And in your background, that's what I used to do when I started 2.5 years ago. I used to have knickknacks and remembrances and parts of history and just little decorations, etc. And I decided no matter where we are or what's going on, I can just have this actual physical screen behind me. But I really am enjoying all that I see behind you. And Barbara, I got to listen to you. Okay, so Jeff, right? Jeff Rubin, and he has known you for a while. And is that a face-to-face knowing, or like most of my friends, a screen-to-screen
It's a screen to screen.
connection?
But I'll tell you a Jeff Rubin story. One
Good.
Sunday morning, I'm reading stuff on LinkedIn, and this man is writing about social activists who are really making a difference in the world. And I thought, okay, this looks interesting. I'm into paragraph 2, and I see my name. I don't remember ever meeting him. I didn't know who he was, but somehow he had researched me and he put me in the article. And I was so filled with gratitude that he thought of me, that he talked about the work that I'm doing, that I had worked with these 10,000 young people in Philadelphia to promote social activism. And I called him. I said, I don't know who you are, but you just made my day. Thank you so much. And from that, we became friends. We have never met because we live in different parts of the country, but he was always gracious to me. And he had me on a podcast where I had the privilege of meeting you, Christine. And that's why I'm here today. So it's all about networking. And I love networking. And I love how Jeff's generosity opened up the story for me to call him, to invite me to speak, to meet you.
It's, it was some time ago. I think I got to know Stacy Shuey, and she was not able to come the day that you and I were on Jeff's screen. And I think she invited me to come and listen to some people speaking on challenges of aging, the joys, the wisdom, the how are we, what have I done right about anything to having to do with that. And I felt like that was probably the first time that I felt like, I wasn't just on a screen and trying to make sure I was sitting up straight or answering with coherence. It was more like I just felt like I just got done sitting around Jeff's living room and being amazed at the people through their stories. Just the individuals I didn't know that much about, but what they shared about what was important. Like I said, how they were doing something right in this whole category. I knew I didn't want to just go, well, that was nice and be done. So I was really glad that I happened back, that I still see notifications. And I was just, I felt like someone had said, oh, come down here in this little cave, this little spot. There's a little something I want you to see with a flashlight. When we get down there, they turned on all the lights, and it turns out to be this gold mine with jewels everywhere. And it was you, Barbara. That someone's just like, we're going to meet this gal. And it's like, oh, there's going to be something interesting here. And all the lights went on, and everything that you were saying, I was begging in my heart, I want to hear more from her. And that is why you're here today.
Okay.
And it is only magnificently appropriate that this is a time of celebrating mothers and seeing their value, the jewels that they are, the vein of gold that they bring into any life that calls them mom, calls them mother, calls them the the matriarch in their life, especially during the years when you still have those opportunities to make a change that could go on for decades. And that is true in your situation. I've heard parts of what has occurred over the years having to do with your mom and your grandma. I just want to invite you to tell anything that you already mentioned in Jeff's living room and anything more that comes to your mind today. And I'm so grateful that you really sculpted, beautifully carved out this time so that I could bring this to anyone else who could go, I want to be that kind of mother. I need that kind of mother. I can't believe how much that mother's input has touched person after person. And maybe some of these people didn't have the influence of a mother, and they found you, Barbara.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that very beautiful introduction, Christine. It was a joy to meet you in Jeff's living room. And it's appropriate that this is right by Mother's Day, because whenever I think about my life, I think about my parents, of course, but I think a lot about the women in my life, because the two women, my mother and my paternal grandmother, had a huge impact in my life. And I want to share with your listeners why that is. And it starts with my family history. My parents lived in Krakow, Poland. That was my father's city. And my mother lived in Lodz. And the story begins right before the Holocaust started. My mother was 15 years old when the decree came that she had to pack whatever she could fit in a little suitcase and go from her home to a ghetto, an area in the city of Lodz that was designated for Jews and undesirables to live. My mother had no idea what was about to happen to her life. And she told me that she wasn't sure what to pack. And one of the things she took was her plant, a plant. She thought to herself, who's going to water this plant? And when she had no idea where she was really going. And that really touched me, that her humanity at 15 was such that she worried about the plant. When she got to the large ghetto, she saw that these little kids, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, were just running around aimlessly. Many of their parents had typhus, this horrendous illness. Some had died. Some of the parents had been deported without their children. So my mother decided that she would gather up a lot of these little kids with a friend of hers, and every day would sing songs, make up games, tell stories, because she said to me, they did not deserve this, and I was older already, and I could make a difference in their lives. And those stories touched me so deeply that even when she was in the most horrific situation in her own life, she cared enough to impact the lives of children. And I'll tell you an interesting PS, because my mother died 10 years ago. And one of the last things she said to me was, if I die, who will take care of the children? And I immediately knew that she meant the children in the Lodz ghetto. My mother had dementia and frequently talked about the past as if it was happening in the present. And I said, don't worry, I will never stop taking care of those children. And she squeezed my hand and said, thank you, I love you so much. So this story so influenced her life, taking care of these children under the most dire circumstances. So this is a first lesson that I learned. Even when things are horrific and terrible, what can you do to be a mensch, which is a Yiddish German word that means a good person? What can you do to comfort someone, to help someone? And I will continue with my story. My mother was sent at 19 to Auschwitz. the infamous concentration camp in Poland. And my mother snuck a toothbrush into her dress. She didn't have clean water. She didn't have toothpaste, but the feel of the bristles on her teeth made her feel human. And I didn't know that total story until I got to Auschwitz with my mother on a trip we took in 1989, because one of the outcomes from the trauma of having lost this toothbrush, which was her only possession, was that my mother used to brush her teeth 5 to 8 times a day. Her toothbrush became so important to her. It was a sign of her freedom. And when I was standing in Auschwitz with her and she was telling me the story, my heart sank. Can you imagine your mom telling you that at 19 she had lost everything? The only thing she had left was a toothbrush, and the Nazis took that away from her. Well, I had such a horrible reaction to this that I ran into the courtyard at Auschwitz just to catch my breath. I couldn't stop crying. I felt horribly. And there were a group of German teenage boys laughing and clowning around. And I approached them and I said to them, "What are you doing? Do you know where you are? This is a killing place." German was my first language, so I was able to speak to them in German. And they laughed more. And bam, something popped into my head. I have a master's degree in education, but at the time I was recruiting doctors and senior level healthcare executives. I loved the work. I enjoyed meeting the people. I enjoyed creating these good matches for positions. And I thought, I'm not going back to Philadelphia where I live to do that anymore. I'm going to work with youth to empower them to become social activists, to be kind, to be caring, to reach out, to help other people. Because the laughter and the inappropriate behavior of these teenage boys so upset me that I had this epiphany, and the name Champions of Caring popped into my head. And I thought, why do we only make a big fuss over the straight A student, the athlete, the musician? What about someone with a great heart? Why aren't they the heroes of our time? And these were the thoughts that were going through my head as I was standing in Auschwitz. And I was driven that I am going to change my world around and come back to Philadelphia. And this name Champions of Caring just seemed so right. Now, I was very blessed with an incredible friendship with my girlfriend, my dear girlfriend, who unfortunately passed away quite a few years ago, Suzanne Wright. And her husband, Bob Wright, was the CEO of NBC Universal. They called me because they knew my parents and they wanted to know how the trip went. And when I shared the idea of Champions of Caring, Bob said, NBC will help you out. And Barbara, guess what? I have a meeting with Steven Spielberg next week. He's making this movie called Schindler's List, and NBC is going to show the movie. And I thought, oh my God, God is watching over me. This is unbelievable. He said, could you bullet out the key points about why you're making this foundation happen, what you care about, what your goals and objectives are, and I will read it to him. And guess what, Christine? I got money from Steven Spielberg's Righteous Persons Foundation, which was the seed money to start Champions of Caring. So I'm extremely grateful to Bob Wright and to Steven Spielberg. It was like God was watching over me, and we were able to begin Champions of Caring. I want to go back for a moment and talk about my grandmother, because my grandmother taught me a lot as well. My grandmother was an entrepreneur, and this is in the 1920s. She had different kinds of businesses, but she got into the coral business. Do you see my ring? This stone is coral. So my grandmother had a tutor who taught her Italian, which was her fifth language. And my grandmother found a woman in Livorno, Italy. And can you picture this? In the 1920s, she's taking the train by herself from Krakow, Poland, to Livorno, Italy, and she buys this ring. Now, this ring has a very, very important function in my life because this ring became my mother's engagement ring. But let me get to tell you how that all happened. My mother was sent from Auschwitz to another camp called Stutthof and wound up in Theresienstadt. My dad was very lucky to work for Oskar Schindler, if you saw the film Schindler's List. But unfortunately, he was not sent to the new place that Schindler created for his workers. He moved out of Krakow to Brinlitz. Instead, my father went on the death march. And while he was on the death march, he was carrying his cousin Henry, who had typhus. And it was snow and cold, brutal winter. And they marched for weeks. And my father kept carrying Henry because if he didn't, Henry was going to fall into the snow. Henry died at 102 years of age. And for every birthday, he would call my father when he was alive. And then when my father died, he would call me and my brother to say, if it wasn't for your dad, I would not be alive. Well, my father wound up at the Theresienstadt concentration camp where my mother was incarcerated. And they fell in love. My mother weighed 60 pounds. My dad weighed 80 pounds. They had suffered from typhus. But they were liberated in May of 1945 by the Russian army. And they decided they would go back together to my mother's town, Lodz, Poland, and then to Krakow. When they got to Lodz, out of 65 people, no one was alive. When they got to Krakow, he found his mother, my grandmother, and his brother and a cousin. And when my grandmother saw my mother, she got so excited. She said, oh my God, I have a ring that was hidden during these horrible years by this Polish man who worked for me. I'm going to go get the ring, and this will be my engagement gift to you. They go and find the man. And guess what, Christine? You're not going to believe it. After all that had happened, the millions who were killed, he denied having this ring. My grandmother went and got the police, and miraculously, the ring appeared. This became my mother's engagement ring. For my 50th birthday, my mother took this ring off of her finger, put it on mine, and she said to me, honey, I want you to wear this every day of your life. And when you look at it, think about the gratitude that I felt that I had survived, that I had met your dad, that your grandmother gave me this ring, that I had a new life. I was going to have children and I was going to be free. So when you look at this ring, think about being kind. Every time you look at the ring, think about kindness. What did you do today to be kind? What else can you do? So this ring is a reflection of your humanity. And this touched me so deeply that I'm happy to tell you that I'm working with an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, Henry Nevison, and we're making a movie called The Coral Ring Legacy. And it all starts with the story of my family and this ring. So my grandmother, I was telling you a little bit about her influence. She was a strong businesswoman. When my grandmother got to Auschwitz, she found berries growing on the ground, Christine. And when she crushed them, they made a rouge-like substance. Every morning, the inmates had to line up to be counted by their numbers. You know, they put numbers on the arms of the people. You lost your name. You know, it's the most degrading thing to do to a person. You take away their name. You take away their identity. You carve into their skin a number. It takes away your humanity. It's just a horrific way to live in life. My grandmother realized that by crushing these berries, she could rouge the cheeks of the frail elderly women in her barracks so that they could live another day. Because if you didn't look like you could work or contribute, you were useless and you could be sent to the gas chamber. So when I heard that kind of story, that my grandmother took the risk of doing this, because if they had found her doing this, she would have been killed. But she used to say to me, even in a concentration camp like Auschwitz, I had to be a mensch, a good person, because I couldn't live with myself. So these were the stories that I was raised with, that under every kind of circumstance, find your humanity, be kind, be caring, help other people. And they could have turned out bitter and angry, and I'm sure people did. But I was so moved that they could be so humane in their attitude. I shared a room with my grandmother. We moved to New York City when I was 3 years old. We came to Ellis Island, and we lived in the Washington Heights neighborhood of New York City, where there were many, many Holocaust survivors. I actually thought, Christine, that everyone's parents were Holocaust survivors, because those were the only people I met in my neighborhood. But my grandmother used to say to me, I was a businesswoman. You could be a businesswoman. You're smart. And this is to I was 5 and 6 years old. Nobody in the 1950s was talking to girls like that. We were told in those years what we couldn't be. Or you could be a teacher, a nurse, a secretary. That's it. Or just get married. We didn't have options in those years. And I was being raised by two women who said, dream big and dream in Technicolor. Do whatever you want to do in life. You have the capabilities. And I heard these words at home only. Nobody else was talking to girls that way. And they really gave me the courage. And my mother said, when you dream, it's got to be in Technicolor and beautiful. You can make it happen. Don't set your standards low, set them high. And these messages have carried me through my whole life, that I could be the best possible person if I work with integrity, commitment, surround myself with very smart people, frequently people who are much smarter than I am, and I can make things happen. So out of the horror of the Holocaust, I was taught to stand up, to speak out, to make a difference, to care. And after the trip from Auschwitz back to Philadelphia, I took that under advisement, and I started a not-for-profit that I called Champions of Caring. And our goal was to empower and educate high school students to become social activists and to honor them for their contributions. And I'm proud to tell you that we worked with over 10,000 young people who gave 1 million hours of service locally, nationally, and globally. And I decided to do something that wasn't being done in the 90s. I wanted to bring together inner city kids, kids from wealthy communities, Black kids, white kids, all kinds of young people, Catholics, Jews. I felt that we're separated in these silos and that you don't get to different people. So I was very lucky. I had a meeting with the president of Drexel University. His name was Konstantin Papadakis. He was an angel, a wonderful human being. And when I said, I need a partner who has space where I can run meetings for all of these kids, and I can do training sessions on how to write a proposal, how to give a speech, how to become a social entrepreneur. And he stopped me and he said, I'm your partner and Drexel is your partner. And he said, let me tell you why. My wife, Ileana's family lived in Salonika, Greece. They hid Jews during the Holocaust. I am your partner, Barbara. Well, I am so eternally grateful to this man, because by having classrooms and auditoriums and professors available to me at Drexel, the people whose children were from the wealthy communities didn't have any problem driving their kids into Center City, Philadelphia. The inner city kids, I gave tokens to, and they were able to take the train and come to Drexel. And they all felt so special because they were freshmen and sophomores in high school. To be on a college campus once a month on a Sunday for 4 hours made them feel really special. And their parents felt great about it. So I'm so grateful to Taki Papadakis because I could have had a real problem if I didn't have a space like Drexel University to use for our empowerment workshops. And it was wonderful. We had our award ceremonies there, and the kids would walk down the aisle, and you would see Black kids and white kids and Hispanic kids and Jewish kids and Catholic kids all marching down to the tune of "We Are the Champions," telling the audience about what they did to create a kinder world. And they were amazing. They created book drives. They helped at homeless shelters. They fed the poor. They collected eyeglasses and sent them to third world countries where there were none available. But the beauty of the program was, Christine, I never told them what to do. I would say to them, what's something that touches your soul? What's something that you love a lot? What's something that makes you angry? So let me share a quick story about Raul. Raul is sitting at Drexel one day, and I say, what do you love? And he goes, I love salsa dancing. That's great. I go, what makes you angry? He says, I get really angry when these old white people go to the senior center across the street from my school, and when they see Latino and Black guys like me, they never make eye contact. They cross the street. They don't want to deal with us. I said, do you think you could take your love for salsa dancing and your anger about how they don't want to connect with you and create a project? And instantly he says to me, what if we went in there and taught them the salsa? I bet they would love that. I said, I think that's a great idea. But, this is a class, and I want you to really be prepared. You need to write a proposal. I could tell he's getting very anxious at this point, explaining your goals and objectives and why you want to do this project. You need to get permission from the principal. Then you need to send this over to the executive director of the senior center. And I could tell his body language was like, oh, you're killing me, lady. I said, but no, you're going to get credit for this, but you have to do it the right way. Well, he got a guidance counselor to help him. And before you know it, he recruited 10 Black and Hispanic boys who also wanted to be part of the project. They taught each other how to dance the salsa because dancing something and teaching something are two different skill sets. And then they went in and they were teaching the seniors the salsa. Every year in May, we had an award ceremony honoring the young high school students who were being celebrated as the heroes of their time for creating wonderful social justice projects. And at the end of the program, Raul gets on the stage in front of 500 people with an 85-year-old woman, and they dance the salsa. And she goes to the microphone and says, Raul, before I met you, I had hate in my heart, and I didn't even know it. Thank you. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, you changed my life forever. And it was so moving. So the combination was, what do you love and what upsets you? So sitting in one of the rooms one day is Maddie. And Maddie looks at Raul and says, you blew me away with your project, but I have an idea too. I'm a fashionista. I love creating fashions, but I'm very upset about the genocide in Darfur. What if I created shirts that said Save Darfur and I put a design on them and we sell them and we give the money to the Save Darfur Foundation? And I said, I love that idea. And she says, what if every day at lunch at school, I get my friends together and we write letters to the editor of the newspapers, to congressmen. She was really doing advocacy work, and we get the word out. And she said, what if I get my whole family involved, my parents, my grandparents, and friends? They stayed with this project working for other hate causes, where they were trying to stop hatred. All through her college career and even when she went into law school, this became a family endeavor. And that's what I want to share with your listeners, that it's so beautiful if you can get people from different generations and even from your own family to come together to say, we want to create social change. We as a family want to sit and think about, what do we care about? What are the skills that we have that we would want to use? What kind of project can we create? And I urge your listeners to try to do that. It's a wonderful activity to do. Mother's Day is coming up. Any holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, any holiday you observe, and you have the table filled with people from different generations. Go around the table and ask them, what do they care about? What's something that's really upsetting to them? And what can they do about it? And who can do what? And I have found this to be so helpful. And I'll give you a little story. This happened with some friends of mine. They're all big golfers. And they were sitting at a holiday table. And the grandson says, I'm learning golf and I really love it. But I don't think inner city kids can afford to play golf. It's really expensive.
Right.
What if we went into inner city schools and they would never learn how to play golf? And what if we taught them how to play golf? And the grandfather says, well, I don't have the time to do that, but I'll give you the money. You make up a budget of what you would need for this project. The son says to the grandson, what if you and I went in after school, we spoke with the principal, and we can create a golf club? And we could come once a week for a bunch of weeks and see if we could help these young kids learn how to play golf. And the beauty behind the story is that every generation got involved and every generation did what they were comfortable doing. The grandfather was not up to going to the school and actually teaching the golf, but the son and the grandson really enjoyed doing that. Now, this is an all-male story. With the story about Maddie, was a lot of the women who got involved in her family. But I think it's beautiful if everyone can get involved.
Right.
And the one thing I want to share that I think is so critical, sometimes the youngest person at the table has the best ideas. So don't think just because someone is 8 or 9 years old, everyone should have a chance to share. If they could fix something in the world, what would they want to do? What is their dream or wish to create social justice around? And I find this is a beautiful way of pulling a family together, especially on a holiday, to talk about the world is in trouble. I'm not getting political in this discussion, but there are a lot of issues right now that are creating a lot of tension in our world. And I'm very involved with a group of people in a Champions of Caring meeting of the Minds organization, where we meet once a month from 7 to 8, the third Thursday of the month. And if your listeners are interested, we can get them the information. And we talk about what is happening that really upsets you. Yesterday, we had a conversation and people were very upset about what is happening to the disbanding of AmeriCorps. I used a lot of AmeriCorps students to help me with my foundation. There are a lot of issues that people are resenting or angry about. So I can hear my mother in my head, stand up, do something. Don't just sit back there and complain. Get like-minded people together and create a project. Think of your goals and objectives.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to do with this movie that we're creating, The Coral Ring Legacy. What we did for the movie, which I encourage your listeners to go to our website, championsofcaring.org. The trailer is on there. We followed some of our champions who were in high school when we met them, and now they're in their 30s and 40s, to see, are they still engaged in social justice? So Dr. Kimberly Goyette, who's the head of the sociology department at Temple University, did a longitudinal study about these kids who are now grown adults with their own children. What did this program do for you? Did it change you? Are you involved in social justice? What did you learn? And it was the greatest gift in the world for me to see the results, that this program absolutely changed them, that it inspires them to think about creating social change, that it was the first time they met people from different nationalities, different backgrounds, and that they felt that was such an important thing, to know someone different than who you are, that this was a launch pad for them to become a lifetime social activist. So we're following 5 or 6 of these young people in the film to show what they're doing now. One of them is in Uusakaupunki, Finland, an
Mhm.
African American young man in a country that has very few people of color, who
Yes.
is working with asylum seekers from Ukraine, from Yugoslavia, from Iraq, who are coming to Finland and helping them get jobs and getting settled with their children, going to school and feel comfortable in this new environment. And he is so beloved in Finland. They don't have many Black people there, but he has been in politics. People love him.
Mm.
He's very involved in the community, helping out, especially these asylum seekers, and befriending them and helping them get acculturated and acclimated to living in Finland. We have a young woman doctor. Her name is Neha Gupta. Neha, when she was 11, would go to India. She lived in Philadelphia, but every year she would go to India with her family, and they would visit an orphanage. And when she was about 11 years old, she came back and realized there are no toys, there's nothing for these orphans. And she felt really sad about that. So she took all of her toys and called 2 or 3 of her other friends, and they took all of their toys and did a garage sale. And they took the money, and the next year she went to India. She gave it to the orphanage to buy toys for these young children. Well, let me bring you up to date. Neha is now an emergency room physician at George Washington University Hospital. She has worked with, I need a drum roll here, 30,000
Okay, drum roll. Yes.
orphans around the world. Desmond Tutu recently gave her an award for outstanding service. She is extraordinary. She started this as a little kid, and
Yes.
she's still doing this and training people. I mean, I hope people will watch our documentary to get inspired and see what kids started doing at 11 and continue to do in their 30s and 40s, and how they're teaching this to their own children. It's breathtaking. So, from my mother and my grandmother, I learned to be kind, to create programs for young people to become social justice advocates. That toothbrush story so inspired my life that I want to create social change. And now I'm on fire, given what's going on in the world. We need to focus on what's important to us and address it. We can't just sit back and say it's terrible, but I can't do anything. I hate when people say that to me.
Right.
On our website, championsofcaring.org, is a toolkit which shows you how to create a project. And I've also written a book called Live Your Legacy Now, which teaches people how to do this. And I pray that some of your listeners will go to our website and look at the trailer and look at the empowerment toolkit and say, I care about this. And now I see how I can start addressing that problem and pull in people of different ages, different backgrounds to help me address it. And one of the last things I really want to stress as I'm talking about Champions of Caring today, I got very involved at Temple University in intergenerational work. I approached a professor there, Dr. Tanya Giovanetti, in the psychology department, and said, what if we had a class that ranged in age from 18 to 95? And first she looked at me like, woo, this is crazy. I said, what do you think? And we do a course about positive aging. And she thought about it and she said, okay, let's try it. So we did. She taught one day a week. And the second day, some of my colleagues taught, and then the students taught. And it was extraordinary. The kids did pre and post testing, and the seniors, the adults, had to take a pre and post test. And the results were unbelievable. Each population was nervous about how this was going to go, but they wanted to try it anyway. At the end, it showed I've never had such an amazing experience. I love these older people. They're not my grandparents. We have a very different relationship, but they've enriched my life. During COVID, we started intergenerational cafes on Zoom because, we couldn't go anywhere. And the first meeting, everyone involved, we could have like 10 pairs of seniors and younger people. And we gave them these cards, and the cards had questions on them. How do you show gratitude? What's something you've done recently to add joy to someone's life? So every card had a different title, and there were questions to help the conversation. But what I found is that when you're with a partner, I've done this 5 times, the conversation just starts flowing and goes in lots of directions. And it's really an opening up of the mind and the heart. And I've become very close and friendly with my college students that have been my partners through the cafe. We're actually in the middle of one right now. And I can tell you, we have a 91-year-old woman in our group. She has been talking to 2 of her students once a week, drum roll again, 4 years. 4 years. Once a week for 4 years. What they add to each other's lives is extraordinary. Her name is Thelma Reese. She's a very dear friend. And that's what happens. We are not grandparenting these children. It's a different relationship. But there's such a good feeling about this intergenerational connection. So I changed the mission of Champions of Caring to not just high school students, but to bring together people of all ages and all backgrounds to create social justice. Because I believe when multiple generations come together, the wisdom, the experience, the tech skills, everything just meshes so beautifully. I'm very poor on social media. I really am not good at this. But I have a student, her name is Allie. She has us on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. And I'm proud to tell you that we have over 5 million viewers on Instagram. I told the story of my mother's toothbrush. 3.3 million people watched that on Instagram. So I'm so grateful that this beautiful
I'm so glad.
put this on, and it's Champions of Caring on Instagram, and that we have these followers. And it's beautiful that this could be pushed out through social media and that people are responding. And I did one, my mother, when I was 7, played a game with me, Christine. It was called the Mensch test. Mensch, as I had told you earlier, means a good person. So she would say to me every day when I came home from school, honey, were you a good person today? Were you a mensch? Tell me what you did. Well, Christine, when we started, I wanted to really impress her. So I made up these stories that the building was on fire and I was Superwoman and I saved everybody in the building. And she would go, honey, I can smell a lie. That did not happen. She said, listen to me. To be a good person, just be kind. Invite someone who has no friends to sit with you. Share your snack. Invite someone who's lonely to come to our house over the weekend so you can play together. Just start small. Start small. And do you know, till my mother died about 15 years ago, she would call me almost every day. And her last question was, were you a mensch today? And tell me how. And when I go to sleep at night, Christine, I hear my mother in my head asking me the question, and I review in my head, what did I do that was kind, and what could I have done better, and what can I do tomorrow? So when I posted this on Instagram, we got millions of views, and I got comments like, I'm calling my daughter. I want her to do this with the grandchildren every day. And this is not a Jewish game. This is a game for everybody. I don't only work with Jewish kids in these
No.
organizations. It's for everyone. But I thought this is something my mother did with me and my brother when we were children growing up, and that it really informs me to think that way. Am I kind? How could I be kinder? What can I be doing to be kinder? Who should I involve with me? And it's a really good way to go through life, especially in polarizing times like we have right now, where there's anger and divisiveness. If we could come together and address our concerns, we can make amazing things happen. And I go back, it's to my mother and my grandmother. And on Mother's Day, I think of them with gratitude, and my dad too. But the focus, these two women really raised me on a day-to-day basis. And that's what they told me. You can do it. Don't have anyone ever tell you you can't. And that was the best advice I ever got. Or I would have never had the courage to start a not-for-profit that reached out to 10,000 kids, or to write a book, or to create this documentary with the filmmaker. They gave me the confidence and the strength in myself to say, yes, I can. And I surround myself with smart people, and that's the magic formula.
I go back to the word undesirables. Right near the beginning of our time, you said, and they were placed in the ghetto where they put the Jews and the undesirables.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept catching a wave of the undesirables through everything that you were saying. And I was like, what makes a person undesirable? That's really not the question.
Well,
it's how can I be a mensch? How can I be a kind person, regardless of whether I'm naturally have an affinity with the way that person is, the way that my senses take in that person, what I know of the world and history. How can I extend kindness out to that individual and that one? And how can I lift them to a point where they are extending kindness out too, which may already be in them. They just haven't had that sort of an input and encouragement and fuel for the light inside of them. And there were so many things that you mentioned. Finland, not that many people of color. You mentioned, the polarizing times, and you talked about the what do you love? What do you enjoy? What do you gravitate toward? What causes you to be livid, to be, just want to shun this? You wish it didn't exist. How can you take both of those strong? I think of the positive maybe being very enduring and getting deeper because it is so in you, and the other, it has its moments of explosiveness, and it just takes you away. You can't get over it in a few minutes or maybe even a few days. And how can you bring that together to make a change in something that doesn't need to be that way? I'm so grateful that even some of the people who have entered into your program were seen as not valuable, or what would they add, or that's different. I'm not used to that. Or even a person who's at, like you said, 19 and 95, could both look at each other and go, we just don't have common ground. That's just all there is to it. There's not going to be a collaboration here. And all of a sudden, this is the best course I've ever taken. This is the best time I've ever had being different and being with people who are different. And I didn't realize how much I would desire to come alongside and to enter in and to know their story and to see their viewpoint. And so I'm just so grateful that you were asked, how were you a mensch today? And then at a time in Auschwitz when clearly undesirable people were laughing even harder at a strong emotion of a person they didn't have an affinity with, that would go pop inside of you, and you'd be like, I need to empower and bring information to exactly these people that I'm around. And you have thousands upon thousands of times. And I know there are stories that you don't know, and I'm excited about the number of times that people like Jeff Rubin are going to write about you, are going to speak about you, and you're going to be able to go, you just made my day. I did not know I had an impact on you. I didn't know you were watching me. I didn't know you even knew about this. Well, and here I'm hearing this whole other fantastic moment. I should let you go to what you are going to do next today, and just tell you, I have an attitude of gratitude. As you were speaking, it just caused me to go, that's how I can go forward into this next week, of just going, what is it that I see that seems like too polarizing or pushing away elements? And instead, how can I put this together? How can I enact this? I appreciate you talking about advocates, activists. That's just a whole nother conversation that I would love to hear from you and others on. When do you realize, I think I'm an activist? Oh,
but that's
I was an advocate for that situation, person, etc.
Something so important, Christine. I didn't go into this thinking I am an activist. By doing the work, I then thought, oh, that means I'm an activist. And that's what these young people learned. They are activists. They didn't go in saying, I'm an activist and I'm going to do this. They went in saying, I don't like this and I love this and I can combine it and do a project. And then they realized how empowered they were to create social change. So I urge your listeners to think about, what do they care about? What upsets them? Who would they involve? They're very basic questions. But if you come together at a table with a group of different ages, different backgrounds, like-minded people, you can create something. We have more power than we know we have. And I'm happy to give you, which is on our website, the tools to empower you to take any idea and see if you can make it happen. And it's a gift to feel empowered. Some people don't realize the power they have. They've never used it. They've never leaned into that power. But I urge you, the times are so difficult now.
Yes.
Lean into that power. Surround yourself with people who care, of all ages, and brainstorm ideas and put together a project. And then send it to me at barbara@championsofcaring.org. I'd love to hear from you and see what you're doing to create a kinder world. We need it desperately.
And this is my send-off. Thank you. And did you hear that, folks? Barbara has power tools, a kit full of power tools for you. But let her know what happened when you got to work, when you used them. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Thank you, Christine, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there and the grandmothers.
And happy Mother's Day. And I'm glad that you're going to talk to your offspring about what they can do with their offspring to talk about these just around the table.
Thank you. It was a joy.